Thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to have an open dialogue with you about this important topic of trusted AI in action, designing proactive notifications to reduce call drivers with confidence. AI is such a critical topic today, and during this webinar, we want to talk to you about what we're seeing with our clients, and we're looking to share some of our tools, accelerators, and frameworks to explore what's possible. We're also going to share some real world examples with you and invite you to do the same after you've watched the webinar. So with that, let's do some intros. Adam, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm Adam Corneal, Senior Director of AI and Analytics at Logic 2020. I have a background in machine learning, and I work with many of our clients on AI programs and AI governance, and just excited to share it with you all today.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. My name is Amit Unadkat. I'm a senior manager with our digital strategy and transformation practice. I'm really passionate about automation, and I love to build useful products, particularly ones that we can use in our everyday lives. And some of you may have seen a previous webinar on some of these topics that I've hosted, and we're really looking forward to tying some of those concepts together in today's call. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to start with a high-level discussion around trusted AI, and we're going to talk about what it is and how to build it, and really try to galvanize it around a couple of use cases that we've seen with our clients. We're also curious to hear from you after the webinar where you're seeing this on your AI journey and where you are on your AI journey. And some of the key takeaways from this webinar are to learn how to design AI solutions with a purpose, to explore frameworks to help you ask and answer the right questions in this area, and to look at some of the ways that you can address trust and transparency at scale, particularly using a measurable approach to ultimately help improve relationships with your customers. So with that, let's get started. Adam, AI has really been the topic of du jour lately. Do you want to talk a little bit about the momentum we're seeing in the market?
Yeah, I'd love to. It is a fascinating time. No doubt, everybody has experienced AI in some part of their life at this point, and the transformative power that it has in different ways and the way that people are thinking about it. It's easy to get lost in all of that development, and not see the context of how this has all grown up and where it's going. Having been along the ride, I think it's fascinating. We have, over the last couple decades, seen a major transformation in how data is managed, and how machine learning is able to be applied to that. We saw a big boom in data science and machine learning methods, and particularly that grew up around natural language processing, where chatbots became accessible, and embeddings and transformer models grew up. And we had these new ways to be able to classify text and organize documents and do more advanced predictive work. And then we had ChatGPT, some of the big breakthroughs in transformer-based natural language processing models, and the explosion of large language models that we've been experiencing over the last few years. And just recently starting to reshape that into agentic AI, that is agent-based AI that is capable of using tools, doing introspection as it makes decisions, interacting with other systems, using human-in-the-loop feedback, and even multi-agent orchestrations, where you have specialized agents with specialized knowledge, fulfilling different roles as they work through a task. And where this is all going is that we are building bigger and more complicated layers of intelligence that can be orchestrated in these workflows to solve more complex problems. And realistically, what that means is that AI's capability and its place in the workforce is growing. And it's growing in a way that is going to reshape a lot of different jobs and what we do. And learning how that fits in and how to work with that is going to be the challenge of the next several years. And so that's where we want to focus here today is as that transition happens, as these capabilities grow, how do we work with that? And how do we get those benefits out of it while managing some of the risks and complexities that come with it?
Thank you, Adam. This reminds me of that Spider-Man quote: "With great power comes great responsibility." And with all this power, responsibility is definitely going to be part of the equation.
Exactly.
So with so much momentum around AI, it's really critical that it's applied the right way. And that's one thing we really want to highlight here is that AI is not implemented, it's applied. And generally, we want to keep three things in mind for really any AI project. Number one, it must be designed for purpose, whether you're building some intelligent robotics capabilities or whether you're trying to automate parts of your business flow. It's combining that with your business goals and being cognizant of the risks that will make it more successful. It also requires strong governance. And these are defined and measurable ways that you can monitor what's going on. And finally, supervision, where you've got continuous tuning, you've got bias remediation, you've got transparency around reliability, accuracy, and performance of your models. And this is not a one-time exercise that happens before launch. This is a continuous ongoing exercise that must happen as the models continue to work. On the right-hand side, you see a visual representation of some of these concepts. At its core, trusted AI is aimed at mitigating risks. And some of the risks are listed here: legal, privacy, security, operational, ethical, and performance risks, for example. It's also aimed at supporting some of the operational elements that come with applying AI. So how do you correctly train, model, prepare your data, deploy the models, monitor, and then validate your results? And so while this is a 30,000 foot view, this lens is one that we always apply with our clients. And it's really critical that the AI project be framed correctly so it's successful. So now let's take a more practical view next. So both ML and Gen AI implementations have risks, as we saw in the previous slide. And so practically speaking, why is AI safety so important? There's 6 areas that we've highlighted here: privacy, ethics and bias, legal and compliance, performance, operations, and security. And these are considerations for likely everybody watching this webinar. And let's take ethics and bias, for example. Some of you may be tackling this today. How do you evaluate your models for bias? One example that we're seeing with our clients is on a billing affordability program, where they want to make sure that the customers that they're identifying in terms of their affordability of their bills is the model is performing in a fair and an unbiased way, and so that the eligibility for that bill management program is done correctly using the model. And let's look at performance. This is one that we hear across industries, and there's really a high bar that's set for customer-facing outputs that are generated by AI ML. And the accuracy of these tools must be as close to 100% as possible in order for there to really be any sustainable ROI. Can you imagine what it would be like if there was a hallucination with a customer interaction? The trust between the customer and the organization would diminish very quickly if these hallucinations were present. Adam, are there practical areas here that you want to highlight?
Well, I guess what I want to make sure people take away is the transformative power of what we can do with AI, as you said, comes with responsibility. In order to get the benefits out of it, you need to also make sure that you are covering off on these different areas, that it's performing consistently at a level that your customers expect, that it is meeting your legal and ethical and privacy requirements, your cybersecurity requirements, and operationally that you're even set up to be able to run that AI in the long run and handle issues as they come up. And the point I want to make is not to scare anybody, but that in order to get the benefits of AI, if you programatize and create rubrics against these different areas, you can make it faster to achieve those outcomes. You can make a standard by which AI is implemented and measured so that you have the confidence that when you are deploying AI for different use cases, even high stakes use cases, that it's meeting those expectations and the time to get it to deployment and out to your teams or your customers is reduced because that is so standardized. And that's really, I think, the big benefit and the big unlock here.
Definitely. And it almost seems counterintuitive that you would add some of these additional layers and it would make it go faster. I'll pass it on to you for this slide.
Sure. And again, like I want to make sure that we're making clear that there are practical steps to get these things achieved, and it doesn't have to be so daunting because the whole scope of everything on that prior slide is a lot. We are entrusting in these AI systems big parts of the business and lots of responsibility that has taken manual effort over the past. And so to give the same level of care, we want to cover off on those areas, but it can be achieved without a lot of a lot of complexity. It really comes down to these simple areas. Having a strong strategy around how you define those areas of risk and how you are going to set the standards for them, enforce them, and invest in improvements on those areas. The operating process that executes them. So teams who are deploying AI solutions, how do they know that they're meeting those governance gates? How do they know that they're meeting those standards, both in the deployment and in the long run? And then finally, technically, giving them the tools to be able to achieve that. So the templates, the patterns, the KPIs, all the things that you can apply to get your AI solutions up and running to that standard of quality quickly. So I'll dive into a little bit of detail on each of these, and hopefully that'll unpack why it is in fact pretty achievable. So from a strategy perspective, what we recommend is a cross-functional governance board. This can take different shapes in practice, but I think the best outcome is that you have representation from your different business aspects and your IT and your legal to all be able to weigh in on those standards for addressing performance, bias, safety, legality, all those kinds of things. And to use that board to set those standards in a very clear way so that there's shared understanding of what you need in terms of the performance of AI in order to meet your business goals and how you are going to measure that and enforce that. And then going forward, that same governance group can be a controlling body for intake and deployment of new AI solutions, as well as a guiding light for investments to increase AI capabilities or deployments in the business. So they're really at the forefront of this, making sure that the way AI is used inside the business is aligned with the business outcomes you want to achieve. You could next to the next slide, please. On the process element of things, this is kind of where the rubber meets the road. So taking those standards that have been set at the corporate level and applying them to day-to-day development and deployment of AI. So this happens in the intake, where we assign business value to the potential of the AI use cases and look at the potential challenges along those risk areas and design mitigations and KPIs that align to each of those. Then as you get into the development process, those can be measured against. And some of those standard toolkits can be applied to addressing these. And finally, you get to a review gate where you're able to demonstrate this AI is performing at expectations or it's not. And it's not always a binary like that in the sense that of the different standards, you may tune them according to the use cases. So to give an example, for internal use cases where some of the risks may be lower because of how the AI fits into the process, you may have a lower standard for, say, operational readiness. If it goes down or is slipping in terms of accuracy, it's part of a human in the loop process where that can be easily addressed and the trade-offs are not so bad. On the other hand, if it's going into a customer-facing process like you were describing, Amit, then you might want to set those standards very high and make sure that you are controlling how it's operating and having automated fallback mechanisms or retraining mechanisms or other things in place to make sure that your standard of communication with the customer is always high. So creating a flexible framework like that, but with clear checklists that teams can operate against, puts them in a position where they can develop AI confidently and quickly, and then continue to apply those standards post-deployment as you monitor and operate the AI. And then lastly, I touched on this a little bit already, but providing some of the templates from a technical perspective that allow people to do this. So this is everything from your technical patterns and templates for deploying AI systems, agentic AI, things of that kind, your RAG implementations, as well as model registries. So that allows you to have more composability amongst agents and AIs, where as you solve different problems within the business, you can start to reuse them for different use cases and carry over those same kinds of controls. And even bias detection and starter kits and other things like that that can be applied to the AIs to again get them up to quality more quickly. So all of these things are accelerators and get us to a point where we can start rapidly putting out these AI solutions to start solving problems and creating efficiencies in the business. And that's really what it's all about.
Thank you, Adam. We definitely recognize that some of these assets would be new to many organizations. Not many of our clients had toxicity filters and hallucination detectors and fairness testing protocols and content moderation workflow templates before we introduce some of these frameworks. And this is where we believe we can help. We can really help accelerate your implementation by providing some of these templates and frameworks to kickstart your journey. So now that we've framed the problem in a practical lens, let's talk how AI governance and trusted AI can scale. And this scale and achieving that economies of scale is really critical to the ROI behind some of these AI use cases, especially as they proliferate across your organization. So scaling your trusted AI approach should be done systematically. And it always starts with setting a foundation with clear alignment to your business goals. Next, it's about establishing a user base and set up your users to adopt the tools in efficient ways. So making it accessible across departments in the same way for a tech department versus an HR department, a finance department, making that adoption efficient. And then adoption with safety at the core is really critical, especially as different teams pick up the tools. The different teams will have different use cases, and all of these use cases must be looked at with that lens of safety in mind in order for this to work at scale. And once all that's done, there must be a process to maintain trust and continuously provide oversight and improvement as it's in production. And this is likely where you would leverage automation, and you would have those checks and balances in place so that your models that are in production are continuously being monitored, improved, and that trust is being maintained with your customers. And below each of these are some starter checklists that give you an indication of some of the activities that you would do at each stage of scaling. And there's a lot more activities in this, but each of these give you an idea of some of the activities that you would do at each stage. So now that we've explored some of the theoretical aspects, we'd love to look at some real world examples, starting with our first use case here, proactive billing notifications to customers. And for this use case, our hypothesis statement is that for customers requiring financial assistance, we can use an AI model to predict billing issues fairly, avoid bias, and maximize business benefits like containment, while also meeting some of those ethical and legal standards as we're driving down cost. And so where does trusted AI come in? Well, AI governance can target fairness, ethical standards, and monitor for drift or bias and provide triggers if the thresholds are exceeded, for example. And and by applying AI governance correctly, you can ensure reliability and safety because you're tackling some of those things that would cause a negative outcome as a result of using the AI model for the decisions. And the example metrics, and Adam will expand on some of these in a bit. You have your CSAT and your containment scores that many of you will have heard of before, but you may not have heard of false positives and false negatives and how they can be used to define a threshold where you step in and make a difference. Or you've got model drift score, which Adam will talk about in a little bit. And then also understanding the impact that the AI model is having by managing and tracking your bill call volume. Why are people calling in, and for what reason, and how can they proactively be addressed before they call in? Adam, do you want to expand on the application of this use case here?
Sure. I think this is just an interesting one where we're able to apply controls to the AI in a business context. So the graph that you see on the left here is comparing the false negative costs as you go from using zero AI to using full AI automation in this billing notification process, contrasted with the false positive cost. And these are rolled up to the different business concerns. So the operational cost of not having the AI assistance versus the operational cost of having false positives on the AI that cause some confusion with the customers that might have to be dealt with. Contrasting the financial cost of having to triage those situations manually with the customer versus satisfaction and legal issues that might occur if the AI makes mistakes. So what's important is that we're able to take all these different challenges that can occur both with and without AI and quantify them and use tests on the AI to actually find that optimal point where we're getting the most benefit for the least drag, and making a positive contribution to how the business process operates, both internally and from the customer perspective. And then once we've identified that optimal point, we can control to it, making sure that the AI maintains that level of quality and that we're getting that kind of business benefit. And that's where the drift detection comes in, that we can continuously monitor how the AI is operating and how it's impacting customers so that we can be assured that we're reaping that kind of benefit and having a positive impact. And if it starts to slip, that we can automatically detect that and make changes, whether that's a rollback to human involvement or like a fail-safe model situation, depending on the situation. But the main point I wanted to get across here is this is about automating that quality assurance, and putting that in business terms.
Thank you, Adam. That's good context and definitely a interesting problem to solve with some of it with a lot more variables. And it's really cool when it's done right and it's applied correctly. So let's switch gears and look at our second and final use case. This one is about enhanced outage management with accurate estimated time to restoration. Sounds like a mouthful, but essentially the hypothesis statement here is that by using a metrics-driven approach to improve accuracy of predicted ETR, estimated time to restoration, we can build and improve customer trust by providing reliable restoration times rather than outage warnings. And where does trusted AI come in here? Well, we can use retroactive analysis, so past outage events and other data related to those past events, predictive modeling with diverse data sources, and this could include storm, weather, and other diverse data sources, and scenario-based planning. And using all three of these allow us to better anticipate the outcomes of current and future events. And so some of the example metrics that we've seen in this use case, the accuracy of the estimated time to restoration, the outage call volume as it's tracked, understanding the intent of why some of those calls are coming in, and then of course tying that back to your customer satisfaction and some of the operating costs around it. And below you can see an illustrative flow diagram. It's just a high-level view of how this use case could be operationalized. You ingest some of that data, you do some of the pre-processing around that data, and then you go through the model development and iteration. And the output of this is that more accurate estimated time to restoration. And of course, there are specific SME inputs that will be required here. And this is just an illustrative process flow, but it gives you an idea of how this use case has been brought to life before. Adam, do you want to add any more color here?
Sure. I think ETR is just a phenomenal example of a use case that is ripe for AI, because you have these weather events. Nobody wants to lose power. It is top of mind to both the power company and to the customers to get power back on as quickly as possible. People want the best possible information and right away. So you need to provide accurate information at scale quickly. It's a challenge. And it's a challenge that AI is really good at, because we're able to provide all this historical information and context that gets you these accurate estimates and can automatically get them out to customers very rapidly. The important twist, I think, is from a governance perspective, making sure that that meets the expectations of communication that you have with your customers, so that you're not over-promising what can be done, that you're not giving people inaccurate information, and that you're responding appropriately in the moment. And this is another good example where false positives and false negatives are not equal. Telling somebody that they're going to have their power on in 1 hour when it's going to take 3 is not the same as telling somebody that it's going to take 3 hours and getting it back on in 1. And so encoding that kind of SME understanding of how to communicate to the customers is also an important aspect of this, and something that is, again, more scalable and sustainable to do when you have standards of practice of how you approach that AI, and its performance, I guess, standards as you deploy.
Definitely. I know as a customer, I would love for this to be as accurate as possible, and it's such an impactful use case that it's ripe for transformation with AI. So we want to end with this view, and just reiterate that the concepts that we talked about today about AI governance, if they're done correctly, it actually helps you go faster. And it's really counterintuitive to think about adding some of these checks and balances in the process, but really we've seen with our clients that when they do it well, they go faster, and they have a lot more reliable, trustworthy, scaled up systems as a result. And so we want to ask you the question back: where are you on your AI journey today? Having watched this webinar, we'd love to learn and hear from you on where you're struggling the most with your AI implementations, or even tell us what aspect of today's presentation resonated the most with you. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you, Adam, and
Thank you.
talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Take care.